But it's 30 years since we heard this.
Neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours with a little understanding. You can find the perfect plan.
Since we first heard this was the thing I should have said, because otherwise that's a ridiculous statement, but it's watched in 50 countries around the world. Australian soap Neighbours is celebrating its 30th birthday tomorrow.
And while EastEnders celebrated with trying to find out who killed the daughter of the longest-serving character, the leafy suburb of Erinsborough are holding a festival. Of course they are. There'll be some familiar faces returning, including... How are they going to do this? Madge Bishop, played by Anne Charleston. It's lovely to have you with us, Anne.
Thank you.
What was it like returning for the anniversary?
It was lovely. It was just sort of almost like going home, catching up with the faces that I still knew. I mean, the cast, there were very few people I'd worked with in the cast because it's, you know, it's moved on and there are a lot of new young people. But, I mean, it was lovely just to go in. There was Stefan and Tom Oliver and Jackie Woodburn and Alan Fletcher and Ryan Maloney. I mean, they're the only ones left who were in when I was in it. But the crew were there, pretty much the same.
Oh, really? They haven't changed much, the crew, over the years?
No, they're pretty much the same and just as rude as ever.
When you first got the phone call, because obviously your Neighbours fans will know that your character Madge died in Neighbours. When you first got the phone call about coming back, do you think, hold on a minute, how on earth are you going to do this?
I was a little worried because I thought, oh, God, it's not going to be one of those soapy conventions of turning up in the shower when everything else has been a dream. But when I went out and we had a meeting, I got to sit in the boardroom with the producer and turn up for the books with the producer and the storyliners and writers. And, I mean, they were so convincing and so persuasive that Ian and I decided it would be a good idea. And I do think they've handled it rather well.
Is there anything that you can tell us about it?
Well, I really don't think I can say too much, except that it is ambivalent. She could be a ghost or she could be a figment of her husband's imagination.
Who were you the most pleased to see again when you filmed the special?
Oh, heavens. Just everybody, really. I don't think there was anybody in particular.
It must have been great to see Ian Smith, though, who plays Harold.
Oh, well, I mean, we're in touch occasionally anyway, because I've moved back to Australia and we sort of speak to each other on the phone every so often.
What was your working relationship like?
Oh, it was fantastic. We sort of had an understanding of the way each other worked. And Smithy himself has said that he would read the script and he'd know exactly what I was going to do, which filled me with horror because, as I said, I didn't realise I was so predictable. I tried to be full of surprises, but obviously I failed miserably.
Can you remember what it was like when you first met him on set? And then as that sort of relationship developed, was it always good from the start?
Yes, it was. It was great. I mean, I knew Smithy. I'd never worked with him before, but we knew each other socially. So it wasn't like being thrown together with a total stranger. But, the chemistry seemed to kick in quite early on.
For anybody who hasn't seen the, what I would say were the golden days of Neighbours, when you were in it, tell us about how Madge came to arrive in Erinsborough.
Well, Madge came in as a rather sad, stitched-up character, really, because her marriage had broken up. She was married to this dreadful man who'd had an affair and with this woman, Susan, I think. Yeah, Fred. And Susan had had a baby. I don't think I knew about that at the time, but she did. And also she had these two horrible teenagers, Charlene and Henry. And Charlene had had an abortion and Henry was in jail. So she wasn't a particularly happy character. And then she came down to Erinsborough and had to move in with her bullying brother, Max. And she gradually found her footing because she had to be strong to stand up to him. So her situation improved, and then she met Harold, and things got really, a lot better.
Yes, the rest is history, as it were.
Yes.
How much did you inhabit her, and how much did you fight for her to be a strong woman?
I didn't have to initially because I don't know. I mean, it's sort of whether it was the writers taking my cue or me taking the writers' cue. I think it was a dual thing actually. That the writers and I both made her strong. It was later when I went back about 1997 that they didn't quite know how to write her, and I had a battle on my hands.
What happened?
Well, first of all, they made her a vile bitch, which she never was. And then when I objected to that, they made her a victim, which she also never was. So I was really disappointed that all the work I'd put into building up this feisty lady was taken away.
How do those battles work out in the soap world? Do you go into a meeting and say, why are you writing it like this? Let's change it. And are you just shut out of that? Or are you involved in the conversation?
Well, I did make an appointment to go to the production office and say, look, please don't, initially, don't make her a vicious bitch because, they really made her nasty. And as I said, Mrs. Mangle was nasty, but Madge wasn't. She used to fight her corner, and she was strong and she was fiery, but she was never nasty. And then they pulled back, and the next thing I knew, I had an aneurysm, post-traumatic stress disorder. I went blind. I can't think what else. But she really became the ultimate victim. And she was the ultimate victim because they killed her off with pancreatic cancer.
Now, how disappointed were you about that sort of downward trajectory from Madge, who had been such an icon, really? She was probably, aside from Helen maybe, the biggest woman in it.
Yeah, I was very disappointed. My attitude was I don't mind playing a victim if it's written that way from the beginning. Roles like that can be quite satisfying to play, but I didn't want it for this particular character because she was never like that, and I wanted her to stay the way she was. So, yeah, it was very upsetting.
And if they hadn't, do you think would you have liked to have stayed, Anne, do you think, in Neighbours if they'd kept Madge as a strong character?
Yeah, I would have probably stayed on a bit longer because it would have, the first 7 years I was there, I loved every minute. She was great. She was wonderful to play, and I enjoyed every second of it. But I just couldn't stay on.
You talked No, sorry, go on.
No, in the circumstances, I couldn't stay on.
Yeah. You talked there about when Henry and Charlene arrived, your son and daughter, Charlene having had an abortion, Henry having had prison time. There's big issues for daytime telly in Australia. But it was all sort of tinged, wasn't it, with humour. But is that how they got away with it, or was there a conscious effort, do you think, from the writers to be quite edgy?
I don't know that it was ever specified why Henry was in jail. And I think they sort of got away very quickly from the Charlene having had an abortion. They used to come up with issues that they couldn't really explore. There was one occasion where Madge was going away and Charlene was supposed to hit the bottle. And it was all rewritten, and all you ever saw was Kylie pouring wine from a cask into a glass, but you never saw it touch her lips, and you never saw her drunk. But still, in the thing, I had to be worried that she had a drink problem. So it was a pity that they couldn't explore, but it was because of the time slot.
Sure, it's interesting that they'd even attempt to do it, isn't it? And
I
then
think
just sort
they
of
wanted
leave it.
to do it and then were stopped.
Yeah,
because of the broadcasting rules.
When you think, Madge, Anne, sorry, I knew I'd do that at some stage, sorry. When you think, Anne, about the enduring success of something like Neighbours, did you think when you first arrived on set back in the mid-1980s that you'd be here in 2015 talking about a 30-year anniversary?
No, I did not.
So what's the magic of it then?
I don't really know. My view is that if I knew the full formula, I wouldn't be a mere actor. I'd be a rich producer. I think there are a lot of elements. I think because of its main success is over here. I mean, it's obviously still holding its own in Australia, but it's not as successful as it is here. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that it always appears to be summer. Mind you, it could be a situation where we're freezing and going blue with the cold.
Well, it was Melbourne,
in short
wasn't it?
sleeves. Yeah, it's Melbourne.
a
And
bit
Melbourne
like
is known as
Manchester.
the only city in the world that has 4 seasons in one day.
Well, it's worth reminding people as well. You came in 1986, and then this is a clip we're going to play from Neighbours in 1996, when Madge meets Harold for the first time, 4 years after you believed, Anne, that he'd died.
Harold?
Sorry?
Ted?
You know me, don't you?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Madge. Madge Bishop. Your wife.
Look at your face there. You're going, oh no, why did they put that guitar bit in, didn't you? That moment of poignancy. It was a bit much, wasn't it, to be fair? They did that quite a lot, I seem to remember. But I remember that moment vividly.
Oh, right.
Oh, completely. And I also remember when, you know, Harold was, everybody thought Harold was dead.
Yeah.
So remind
Oh, yeah.
anybody who doesn't know, what happened to Harold?
Well, he fell into a calm sea, or he was washed off the rocks by a calm sea, and apparently got picked up by some Tasmanian fishermen in Bass Strait, and they took him to Tasmania, and he was sort of taken under the wing of some Salvation Army people, and they called him Ted, and he'd lost his memory. And I don't know, I think they brought him back to the mainland, and he ended up in Ramsay Street, and sort of things started to ring a bell with him. But he didn't remember me. And there was a scene we had after that one that you played, where I made him take me out to dinner, and got a bit tipsy, and said some stupid things, and he walked out saying, "You're not my type."
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because there was a really great love triangle as well, because you were Lou Carpenter's type too. Tell us about Lou, for anybody who can't remember.
Yes. Because, I mean, well, Madge went and shacked up with Lou after Harold died. And, I mean, that was a fairly tempestuous relationship as well. But it was fun.
What was he like to work with?
Oh, Tom is great. I'd worked with him before because we played husband and wife in an ABC play called The Shifting Heart back in the 60s. And he had to slap me across the face, and the director kept on saying, "Hit her harder, hit her harder." And he eventually nearly broke my jaw.
Oh, my goodness.
You're talking about and the effect that Neighbours had here in the UK and the popularity here in the UK. Got lots of people getting in contact saying it's great to hear you on the radio. Alan says the Neighbours theme tune was our alarm clock at our flat in Stirling University in 1985. He says, this has reminded me of happy days. And this is from Will in Cumbria, who says, my sister was a Neighbours addict in the late 1980s. When she moved to Sweden, we had to record it on an old VHS and send the tapes to her. After she watched them, she sent the tapes back to be re-recorded, and most of the packages would always be inspected by customs when we got them back. It always used to make me smile, he says, to imagine the customs officers watching these tapes which arrived from Sweden to see Madge and Harold on it. That's from Will in Cumbria. So you're bringing back some lovely memories of the past, Dad.
Gosh.
When were you aware
I think
of
it
that?
was on air in Sweden, wasn't it? But she
Well,
would have had to watch
probably
it
could
in
have watched
Swedish.
it in yeah. When were you aware that the show was so popular in the UK? Was that something you knew from day one?
I first became aware that it was widely watched because I was over here on a holiday, and I was doing the touristy thing. I went to Windsor Castle and was wandering around, and I heard this conversation behind me, and this woman said, "Look, I've really got to go. I've got to go home and watch Neighbours." And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. And then during that time, I did the Terry Wogan show. And I arrived at the theatre in Shepherd's Bush, and there was sort of like 500 people waiting for me. And that was that really made me realise just how popular it was.
And you've worked in soap in the UK as well, because as well as being Madge Bishop on Ramsay Street, you were Lily Butterfield in Emmerdale.
That's right.
Can you compare those two experiences? How is it different?
Very different characters, but there was pretty much the same, really, because, I mean, with any soap, you're doing rather a lot of screen time per week.
Yeah, you're churning them out, aren't you, all the
Yes,
time?
you are. And it was pretty much the same with Emmerdale, except with Neighbours we had a couple of rehearsal days. With Emmerdale, everything was rehearse record. But apart from that, it was quite similar.
Anne Charleston is with us, Madge from Neighbours. Neighbours amazingly celebrating its 30th birthday tomorrow. And it was one of the saddest ever soap exits, I think, was when you left. Madge's illness, pancreatic cancer, very sudden. Goodness knows how many millions of people watched it around the world. What was it like for you filming that final episode?
Well, it was a full day's work doing those scenes leading up to the death. So it became a bit turgid, but hopefully it worked. I mean, they wrote it rather well, I thought. I was quite relieved about that. Yeah, it was difficult. It was a difficult day.
The emotion really came across with both you and Harold. You had to go through chemotherapy yourself years earlier. Was it important to you to bring what you'd experienced in your own life to that performance at the end?
I don't know that Madge had chemotherapy. I think it was because pancreatic cancer is one of those awful things that it's always diagnosed late because it doesn't take long. Once it takes hold,
Yes.
It's one of the quickest acting cancers. And no, I didn't really relate to it because, I mean, my case was completely different.
Is it true that Harold, Ian Smith, tried to persuade you to stay on in Neighbours because he said that people of your age, his and your age, found it difficult to find work?
No.
No, that was a rumour that we were told about, so I thought that I would ask you about that. But do you think that
He
is
probably
true?
had enough of me by then.
He probably secretly connived to get you out. No. So, but on the issue of age discrimination, though, did you find it an issue? Did you think that they wanted to get rid of you, get rid of Madge because she was getting too old?
Oh, they did. Yeah, that particular production team, they weren't keen on Madge at all. But that was all right because I wanted to leave anyway.
Was it an age thing or was it a Madge thing?
It was probably an Anne thing. I don't know. But, I mean, it was one of those situations where I'm saying, you're not sacking me, I'm leaving. And they were determined they were sacking me. It was quite strange. But anyway, it all worked out for the best. I mean, I had my flight booked and I was all packed and ready to go because, I mean, I have this beautiful house in Ireland and I wanted to go back there.
Yeah, lovely. Well, happy St. Patrick's Day to you, by the way.
Sorry?
Happy St. Patrick's Day to you.
Thank you. Yes, I must phone my friends on the Emerald Isle and wish them a happy St. Patrick's Day.
And we've had lots of people saying it's great to hear your voice again. And I know that you've tried to get rid of the shackles of Madge from Neighbours, which you've done very well. But you do say that other people find it very hard not to because it was such a character which they grew up with. Is that always been part of things?
Yes, it's there. I mean, I'll never get away from her. And, I mean, that's a double-edged sword, really. It helps me in some areas and hinders me in others. But one just has to live with things like that.
We know that Kylie Minogue's not going to be at the 30th anniversary, but Vanessa says, please will you ask Anne this question?
OK.
Does Anne know if Bouncer is going to be there at the 30th anniversary?
No, Bouncer's gone to God. I heard that news really sadly when I was on tour with a play over here. And I came out the stage door and there were a whole lot of people there wanting autographs. And this man came up and said, do you know Bouncer's dead?
Oh, dear.
And I burst into tears.
I'm sure you did.
I loved that dog.
Oh, well, that's
He was
incredibly
gorgeous.
sad news. But Anne, it's been fantastic to have you on.
Lovely
Thank you so
talking to
much.
you.
That's Anne Charleston, who played Madge Bishop in Neighbours for all those years. And the soap celebrates 30 years tomorrow.